Hello and welcome to this Tuesday Live. I will be discussing, today's session is actually quite different from my usual weekly lives in terms of who I have as a guest in the discussion related to the schools. I know a lot of you are clearly looking at the school's deadline releases, and we all know that Wharton just released their deadlines and application questions. So we're all extremely excited to start the application for that. And this is a perfect timing. This conversation is perfect timing in relation to, talking about what Wharton feels like and what you should anticipate as an applicant, whether you're joining Wharton this fall or are writing your applications for next fall's entry. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We are on a few different platforms. So if you're joining us from Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you can write your questions in the comments and we'll be monitoring those to essentially answer your questions as we go along. If you're joining us from any of the platforms, please just let us know where you're connecting from, whether you are in the States or international. It would be really great to see where you're joining. So the other component that I will say is we are going to have a session on Columbia's application questions and application preparation this coming Thursday, our usual weekly live sessions, and you can join that one if you register. The link is on the screen. Also, if you go to cadmissions.com to our events page, you can see the events that we have coming up, including Wharton, that is going to be on the 27th of this month. We'll have a session dedicated to Wharton specifically. If you don't know if you are competitive to apply to the M7s and top 10 or top 15 schools, we do actually have a quiz that you can complete. There's a two-part response. One is automatic evaluation based on numbers, and then the second part is a written report where I'll look at your responses in more details and provide much more insight into your candidacy. So I will show that on the screen as well, and you can definitely complete the quiz. It's free, so there's no, it's a quick amount of time in terms of completing it. And if you want to have a conversation with me about supporting you on this journey, I encourage you to reach out for also free consultation. We discuss essentially your candidacy, and we discuss if we are a good fit in terms of supporting you on this journey. So with those logistics out of the way, why don't we get started? I'm going to invite our guest to the screen. Priya is a recent grad, so she just graduated Wharton this year, essentially in 2024. And if you read the bio, she pre Wharton, she was working in retail, and then joined Wharton with a dual concentration, and now will be joining Deloitte in their travel and hospitality division. So I'm super excited to have Priya join us online here, and I'll let her talk a little bit more about her journey as well. Priya, welcome to today's live. I'm so excited to have you.
Thanks, Susan, for having me. Super grateful to be here.
Amazing. And also congratulations again.
Thank you.
Graduating Wharton. I'm sure it was not a easy journey to walk, but you're at the other side, and this is an amazing time to celebrate. So
yeah, it's crazy how quickly the 2 years fly by. I'm sure many people say that time and time again, but you're just kind of busy for a solid amount of time over those 2 years. And so it just kind of flies right by, but so grateful for the experience. And again, grateful to you for kind of helping the process along and helping me get into one of my dream schools.
Amazing. Did you expect the workload you got before you joined?
That's a good question. I think I expected a different type of workload. I think I expected it entirely to be academic focused. And what I realized is there was a heavy amount of academic work involved that were, you know, assignments, quizzes, exams, etc. But the bulk of my time was honestly spent juggling that with recruiting and with like socializing and networking with the other students, whether it's through like formalized and organized events or whether it was through something more informal, like a gathering of, some friends or some people part of a club. So I think juggling all of those things together, I truly feel like the past 2 years were probably the busiest 2 years that I have probably had in my life. And it's not because I was entirely focused on academics. It was truly because I felt myself juggling a lot of different parts of my life all together.
Yeah, amazing. Well, we'll definitely get more into those details as we talk about your Wharton experience. But why don't we just sort of step back for a moment and dive into kind of the journey pre-MBA that led you to start to pursue an MBA. So if you can just tell us briefly about that experience.
Yeah, definitely. So, like you mentioned, I came from a retail background, so sort of a non-traditional candidate for business school. I came from Georgetown, was excited about working in the retail space, and spent 5 years at Gap in a variety of roles, kind of working across inventory management, merchandising, design, and then eventually kind of moved into more of a strategy and operations role. So, got to see a lot of different sides of the supply chain, got to kind of understand the business model, and really did enjoy my time at Gap. But felt like, it was the only industry that I knew. It was not necessarily an industry that I wanted to stay in for my like long-term career. And as I thought more about kind of what I wanted to do with my life and what steps I wanted to take in between, my family actually has a hotel business, and I've kind of been brought up and raised in that environment. And so that was something that I was always thinking about. Maybe in the long term, I wanted to get into the real estate space, potentially get into the hospitality space, and be able to kind of elevate and grow that business that my parents kind of have started since I was a kid. And I thought, okay, well, I have pretty good operating experience from retail, and it's kind of similar to hospitality from a consumer facing perspective. And from a service delivery perspective. But I thought, okay, what are the steps that I probably need to take in between to get there? And I think the areas that I felt like I needed to grow the most were probably in my strategic thinking and my high level exposure to like big, meaty, like, future gazing types of problems and how to solve that. And then also kind of thinking more of the hard skills, wanted to get myself more exposed to the finance and the real estate side of things as well. And so, that was sort of my why for business school. And I thought, okay, like, Wharton is one of the best schools for real estate, as well as for business in general. So it felt like a really good fit to come here for my 2 years.
Amazing. I love the journey because it's obviously definitely not non-traditional, but it's also just you came in with such rich experiences in terms of the different sides of business that you saw, and how you're able then to kind of translate that into your applications, and then obviously also on the journey in terms of like why you're doing an MBA as a whole. You did gain a lot of experience beforehand, but now it's, at some point you had to decide what is the things that I'm lacking that I want to have exposure to, and then where can I get those in terms of the best ROI.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was interesting because I felt like, I'm sure, every school has kind of posted their, the diversity of like careers and industries that their student body comes from. And it was interesting to know that coming from a retail background, people who were like me with my experience were less than 3% of the student body. So it's really interesting because I think coming in to a place like Wharton, you meet people from all different walks of life. And it was exciting to also see that my perspective was also quite valuable. When we were talking about operation strategy or we were talking about supply chain strategy, like direct experiences that I've had in my time at Gap, related to the classroom. And it was, exciting and eye-opening, I think, for folks who were interested in moving, let's say, out of consulting into retail, helping navigate them through that journey, I think was a really enriching part of the experience too.
Yeah, that's amazing because the other thing it's I often hear applicants, especially those coming from non-traditional backgrounds, thinking, well, what can I bring to the table? But you are a perfect testament. It's like a small number of people that came into your class with a retail background and how much value you were able to give to those individuals that were thinking about walking the journey that you were already in. So
Yeah.
that's really a testament to just how amazing an MBA program is in terms of different perspectives coming together to form new ideas and new ways of solving problems. Amazing. So now let's talk about your the Wharton experience. What is the Wharton experience? Can you just tell us, for those of us who haven't walked,
Yeah.
present included, me included, essentially. What's the journey like? What's the academic life? What's the hands-on experiences like? And what's the community feel like? I know it's a loaded question, but
Yeah. Yeah.
share
No,
some.
it's fabulous. I almost wish I had someone who could have helped me understand what I was going to get myself into. So I think that, so for context, I had applied to a lot of schools because I knew I wanted to go to business school, and I had gotten into, I think, 6 out of the 7 schools that I had applied to, which were primarily in the M7. Um, I had even visited all those schools and kind of got a feel for each of them. And I think it was helpful to understand what Wharton was like in comparison to some of those other schools. So hopefully I can do it justice by illustrating it. But I think the best way to kind of contextualize Wharton is just by the class size, right? So we have like 850 students. And I think with that comes a pretty large amount of onus on every individual to sort of be a self-starter, find their niche, find the area that they want to kind of like invest their time into, find the friends that they want to, to meet, and then eventually become like very, very good friends with. It's sort of like you're swimming in a very, very large pool, and you have someone from every walk of life, from every continent, every country, and every industry that you could possibly imagine. And so it can feel a little overwhelming when you first get there because there's some level of, maybe imposter syndrome you feel because everyone's so impressive and there's a brand name and all these things associated with Wharton as a school. But then once you kind of dive into it, you start to realize, okay, like I'm starting to swim. Like I'm realizing that, the classwork is actually like only 30% of my job while I'm here, right? Like I have to do that. And I have to decide how much time I want to involve myself in that. But there's a lot of other things that the school has to offer. And it's almost like being that self-starter to take the time to invest your energies and efforts into the spaces that you want. That's kind of like the main thing that I took away from my experience there. There were some people, like very candidly, that I did not like very well. But there were also people who I absolutely loved and adored. And there were people who I truly would never have met otherwise. I think if I had stayed in a retail background, or even if I had just gone directly into a consulting or a strategy role, like I would never have met some of the people that I got to meet. And I feel like a more well-rounded, educated, global citizen because of that experience. And I think that is something that Wharton really does pride itself on, is the diverse community, the just emotional and intellectual kind of like intelligence that everyone has there. And I'd say overall, just the breadth of opportunities that present themselves and the chance for students to sort of like plug into the parts that they want to plug into. So definitely other schools, I think, also have some of that, but I think it's sort of, it's heightened and accelerated in an environment like Wharton, just because you have such a larger class size and because it's sort of sitting at some of like the, top of the rankings in terms of schools to go to.
Yeah, I love that. And I honestly appreciate your honesty in terms of, not liking everyone and then also loving and adoring other people and just recognizing that you don't have to like everyone. I mean, in a class size of 1,000 or close to 1,000, it's a lot to feel like you can, a lot of pressure on an individual level to feel like you have to make friends with everyone and you have to like everyone. So I think, kind of, the analogy you said, like a large pool, there's also a lot of people in that pool. Therefore, you can choose who you want to be with or be around. So that's really
Definitely.
amazing. I love that, and also the opportunities to just the exposures that you wouldn't have otherwise. I think it's an important thing to highlight, because oftentimes, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love academia, is just because there's so many different perspectives that come to the discussion, and everyone is eager and excited and intellectually stimulating. Well, maybe I shouldn't say everyone, but just generally. Which makes it such an exciting place to be, where you don't always get that in the work setting, in the work environment. So I think that's really, really awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the network. I know you and I have spoken about some events that you were attending, which sounds so exciting. Of course, there's a lot of opportunities, as you already highlighted. How has your network been at Wharton in terms of leveraging the student body, leveraging the resources on campus, but also leveraging the alumni body that, we all, I mean, applicants that are going through this process are really looking to be able to leverage, because they do have obviously some very well-known names on their roster?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, networking is something that comes up a lot during business school. So it's not just something we write about in the application. It's truly something that we practice on a regular basis. I'd say to promote my kind of professional ambitions, which were really focused on this like short-term and long-term goal, right? So the long-term goal was to kind of get into the hospitality space and also kind of sharpen my real estate and finance skills, and strategy skills. So that's kind of a loaded aspiration. And so the way I broke it up, into chunks was, I want to do my short-term, post-MBA career in consulting. But I also want to learn, explore, and meet so many different people who are in the finance and the real estate space, in addition to kind of the consulting space. And so for me, what that looked like was, during my recruiting process, I'd say so many people go into kind of like the consulting world, either pre-MBA, going into Wharton, or post-MBA. And so I found my network of like students on campus to be the most helpful people when it came to case prepping, trying to get myself ready for a consulting, case interview. Even for the behavioral interviews, a lot of the other students there were really, really helpful to kind of do those one-on-one behavioral and case interviews to kind of get me ready for, the internship, and then eventually for the summer internship and full-time. I'd say from a, from a real estate and finance perspective, I probably spent a good amount of time meeting people who are part of the clubs that were connected to those spaces. So I was involved in the Wharton Real Estate Club. I was involved in the finance major. And so I met a bunch of people who were taking similar classes to me. And a lot of the projects and assignments that we have are group-based. And so you begin to make a network there just by the nature of having to work together on a lot of projects. And so I think that was really helpful for me, because many people were taking some of these classes already coming in with finance experience or real estate experience. And me not having that background, and many others not having that background, it was kind of a nice symbiotic relationship where, they were helping me kind of get up to speed on some things, and I was able to help them from, a group navigation and facilitation perspective as well. And then I'd say from that experience, I also spent a lot of time talking to the alumni network, and that was incredible. Like, truly, I don't think there was a single person who I reached out to who didn't respond if they were part of the Wharton network. And even something as small as this past summer, I had gone to a conference for women in hotel real estate, and it had nothing to do with Wharton. I happened to go to the happy hour, and I was chatting with someone mentioning that I was in business school, that I was at Wharton, and immediately someone turns around. One of like the leaders of the entire cocktail hour actually comes up to me and says, "Oh, I actually went to Wharton too, and I was part of the travel hospitality club." Like, immediately gives me her card, like stops whatever conversation she was having, gives me her card and said, "Call me, like, let's chat." And I have since then like had, 4 to 5 conversations with this woman who is now a mentor of mine, just because she kind of overheard that, I went through the same program as she did. And I found that to be a pretty good testament to the strength of the network, which is surprising just knowing that it's such a large community, right? Like you assume that the bigger a community gets, the weaker the ties become. But I've been pretty happily surprised that the alumni network has been pretty engaging for the most part. Like I haven't had any issues with people getting in touch with me. And for the most part, people have been really open-minded and, pretty generous with their time when it comes to having conversations, offering up opportunities to connect me to someone else, or if they know of a job opening, like kind of immediately helping to put my name forward for that. So I've really, really appreciated the alumni network, I think, the most out of my experience. From a career services perspective, I know you mentioned that. I'd say for me personally, and again, I'm, trying to be very objective about this. I think I just didn't rely on the career services office as much as maybe some other students did, mostly because my background was a little bit more non-traditional, where I was interested in travel hospitality, I was interested in real estate, and we had like senior fellows in the real estate club who, effectively acted as career advisors for me, but I didn't necessarily, they're not technically part of the career services team. So that was my experience. I didn't rely on them so much, but I did rely on other senior faculty members at Wharton who are part of the departments that I wanted to be involved in. So the finance and the real estate clubs and, the associated departments for those faculty members I did connect with, and they were really helpful in terms of kind of giving me advice and even opening up their Rolodex of, people that they know to, facilitate a conversation. So I think for me, at least, I found it to be a pretty well-rounded experience, but the alumni network was probably the most helpful, then the student body, and then probably career services.
Understood. Well, one, it sounds like you had just a lot of support systems around you in different categories, which is really, really wonderful. As you were sharing that, I was wondering, obviously you also said, 30% of your work was classwork and everything else was networking and all the other activities that you were managing at the same time during your MBA program. And what I was left sort of pondering is like, how important was the fact that you had a goal in mind in being able to leverage all of these things? And do you think that if you went in with like I want to explore, you would have had the same? I know this is a hypothetical question, so just your ability.
No, it's a wonderful question. And I remember, Susan, when we had our sort of like exit conversation, you shared so much like wisdom in that conversation when you said, hey, like set aside every semester time for you to reflect on what your goals are for the semester. And then at the end of the semester, kind of reflect back and realize like, did I achieve that? How did I, what do I need to do to position myself for my next semester? And I think that is such good advice for the 2 years that you have in business school. It flies by so quickly. And I think for me, setting aside some of those goals were really, really helpful because a place like Wharton is so vast and it's very easy to get confused. And I think when you interact with people who are so smart, people coming from consulting, going into something else, some people had great experiences, some people didn't have good experiences with that career. And you're left wondering, well, they're really smart. They're leaving consulting. Should I not be looking at consulting? And I think that, it's important to maintain that focus on what your goals are, what you're prioritizing, and writing down like just 2 to 3 goals every semester and like prioritizing all of your time around that. So making sure you're, prioritizing your classwork around exploring some things, but then also focusing on the areas that you want to improve and sharpen your skills. For your recruiting, making sure your internship connects back to that goal. For your, professional and personal networking, like you want to have friends that you just enjoy spending time with, but you also want to network with people who are plugged into the spaces that you want to get into. So I think having that goal is really important, and you don't want to over-engineer your experience, but it is important to kind of have that in mind because you might otherwise just be left feeling like, oh, I didn't get to do what I wanted to do in business school because it's a pretty short experience.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. It always feels like, oh, I have so much time to explore, but when you get to grad school, it's a whole different experience. It's not like undergraduate, right, where you have like the first 2 years you're exploring and then you decide what you're going to focus on. Here it's like, I'm sure recruiting started immediately once you started your time there.
Yeah.
Shortly thereafter.
I basically started in October for traditional consulting recruiting, which is considered like more of a traditional career path. For folks who are doing non-traditional, it sort of pushes out into the second semester, but it's still a very quick turnaround because, that time in between, you're left you still have to focus on your goals and think about it, even though there's still other things preoccupying your time with social life, classes, et cetera. So really carving out like that, 20, 30 minutes to just think about what you want before the semester kicks off is really, really important.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. I know we're coming to an end. I, of course, prepared more questions than we have time to discuss. But let's hear some advice essentially that you have for applicants that are, starting this journey or have just begun the journey of putting together applications. What advice would you give them in terms of what they should be keeping in mind and how they should be thinking about their applications, as they walk this journey?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I can say is that believe in yourself, like know that there is a positive outcome at the end of this. You might be hitting that proverbial wall of, I don't know how I can make another draft of this essay, or I don't know if I, can get that score on my GMAT or my GRE to get into this program. And I think the main thing that I took away was you have to really believe in yourself and continue to learn from your mistakes and continue to improve, because you will get there. If you believe that you will get there, you will get there. And it might take a little bit more time. It might require a little bit more effort, but it is possible for literally anyone on this call to get into any of these schools. I was definitely nervous about the process, and I knew, coming from a different type of background, knowing that I didn't necessarily have the scores or the essays or, all these things already lined up, spending time just really focusing on this and prioritizing it, taking the exams, writing the essays multiple times, all of that really, really helped me get to where I am today.
I think that's really wonderful. And I'm a huge believer that you can do anything you set your mind to doing, so long as you take action to back up the setting your mind, right? You need the actions associated with it as well, in terms of, taking the steps and giving yourself also time. I was speaking with a client earlier today, and we were talking about, it's not rocket science to go through this process, but the most challenging part is the thinking and the reflection, and then the crafting, making sure that you capture what your heart and soul is feeling, that you want to capture in your application. So I will add, give yourself time also to do these things. Excellent. Okay, so I have a bit of a rapid fire, quick responses that you can give us as we just come to an end of this call. So the first question is, what's your favorite memory at Wharton?
Ooh, rapid fire. I would probably say doing the leadership venture in Patagonia. So we summited a mountain in Argentina, and we're on teams of 6 having to camp outside for 5 days. It was a very painful but very rewarding experience.
That sounds so lovely. And so it's not something you would have done probably on your own if you weren't there.
Definitely not.
What's something unexpected you learn at Wharton?
Oh, how to be a really good self-starter. I already thought I was a self-starter, but I think going to a place like Wharton, where everyone is very type A, you start to learn ways in which you can still continue to improve that. So even if no one has said, hey, you have permission to do this, just you have to give yourself that permission and just say, hey, I'm going to do this thing. So being a self-starter, taking more initiative, and continuing on that journey of being very ambitious and motivated.
I love that. And then the final question is, in one word, how would you describe your Wharton experience?
Oh, this is tough. Transformative, which I know is very cliche, but I think I've learned a lot about myself and a lot about what I want and what I don't want through the whole experience. And I think for that reason, I've come out on the other side very much feeling like a better version of myself. So I would say transformative.
Amazing, amazing. It looks like in the final hour, there was a question that popped up on the screen. Do you have a moment to answer?
Yes.
Amazing. Okay, so the question, I won't put it on the screen just so that it doesn't become a permanent record on the replay. But the question is, Wharton places a strong emphasis on leadership and innovation. Can you share a specific experience or project during your MBA program where you could apply these principles? I think someone has essay question in mind.
Yeah, I think honestly, every facet of Wharton requires some form of leadership. The idea of being a self-starter is a form of leadership. The Patagonia venture that I described was a leadership venture. You're literally supposed to be on a mountain, navigating through a lot of ambiguity, leading a team of 6 or 5 other people with no experience in camping or in mountaineering. And in all of those situations, you're kind of, and then of course, something as mundane as a group project, you are really thrown into the fires and realizing that leadership is a part of your everyday. It starts with you, and it doesn't always show up in a very masculine, domineering form. It's something that can show up in a lot of different ways. And it's something that, is learned. It's not innate in anyone. So hopefully I answered somewhat of that question in this last minute, but I think it's something that is very pervasive at Wharton. And, you have a lot of different opportunities to practice that skill set, whether it's through the formalized McNulty Leadership Program, which I mentioned a few of their, offerings, or whether it's through a fellowship. Like I did a leadership fellowship for, a whole year where you're literally observing and helping other students cultivate their leadership skills, or it's through club, leadership positions. So a lot of different ways to plug in. And even on such a micro mundane level as like, we're all going on a trip to blank place, someone has to organize the trip. Who's doing what? How are you getting everyone together? How are you navigating the planning and the in-person process? All of that requires a lot of leadership. And I would say that it's something to keep in mind as you're thinking about, ways that you've also done that in your life, because many of us have come in with some of those moments of leadership, and it's just about highlighting those experiences and making sure that, you're showing that authentic version of leadership for yourself.
Yeah, no, I think that's really wonderful, because sometimes we don't consider it quote unquote leadership because we have this sort of like grandiose idea of what leadership means, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's like in all the minutia details that you're working with other individuals to make something happen for the greater good, whether that greater good is that 5-person team that you're doing this project on or something bigger than that. Well, it looks like we got disconnected. Okay, you're back. We just lost you for a moment. Well, thank you. I think we're gonna end the session here. Priya, you froze. I don't know if you can hear me. I want to thank everyone for joining, for being here through the entire session. We had a lot of 30 minutes and we went over, so I appreciate the questions that you have dropped in the chat as well. Do join the live that we have on Wharton specifically on the 27th of June. And this week on Thursday, we'll have the session related to Columbia Business School. Hold on, I'm going to just switch this 1 second.
So sorry, I don't know what happened with my laptop. I apologize.
That's okay. You just froze, so it's fine. We're good. I was just closing the session. I wasn't sure if you were able to join, but I was just thanking everyone for joining us and asking these wonderful questions. I know that there are a few other questions that we unfortunately won't have time to answer. But do join the Wharton specific session that I will host on the 27th, that you can definitely ask those questions that you have there.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Priya, so much for taking the time and for answering all of our questions. And hopefully you have a wonderful summer and some time before you start your next chapter.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And for anyone tuned in who's interested in Wharton or the school process in general, find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have any follow-up conversations as well.
Thank you. That is so amazing of you. Thank you so much. And we'll end the live. Thank you again, everyone. Bye.
Take care. Bye.